So good afternoon. My name is Kelly Boyce-Heimbaugh, and I am president of the Chautauqua Women's Club. Thank you. We love the Women's Club. Welcome to our Contemporary Issues Forum lecture. We invite you here to join us every Saturday at 2 p.m. through August 20th. Next week's speaker is Jason Wild, one of the largest cannabis investors in North America. His talk is titled, Cannabis, Illegal to Essential, the Evolution of the Plant's Perception and the Opportunities Ahead. It's going to be very interesting, and I hope you can make it. For 133 years, the Chautauqua Women's Club has provided innovative programming, dynamic events, leadership opportunities for women, and life-changing scholarships for students. Our leadership and legacy is one of significant influences both here on the grounds of Chautauqua community and outside on society. To date, we have given almost $1.8 million to Chautauqua Institution in scholarships for students in the schools of performing and visual arts. Our influence can be seen on society through leadership of the women's suffrage movement, the League of Nations, the Equal Rights Amendment, as well as safe working conditions for employees. Our legacies include such greats as Eleanor Roosevelt, Amelia Earhart, and Sandra Day O'Connor, just to name a few. If you are a member of the Women's Club, we thank you and encourage you to get involved. Volunteering is the easiest way to meet new friends, and if you are not a member, we have a membership table over where Hope is. You can also go on our website at chautauquawomensclub.org, or just come down to our lovely clubhouse on the lake next to the Athenaeum. We are a welcoming community to all, and that is why we are known as the heartbeat of Chautauqua. So thank you for coming, thank you for participating, and thank you for your support. Today, you might have seen this already this morning, down by the lake in front of the clubhouse, we have a pop-up flea boutique. We have the tent going, we have wonderful treasures. People wait all summer long for the sale, and thank you for donating your goods and treasures. And that is from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. today and tomorrow. Today, I am very excited to welcome back Dr. Sean McFate. He will talk for approximately 45 minutes, followed by 15 minutes or so of Q&A. After his talk, please queue up to one of the two mics here. And please, only one question per person to allow others the chance to ask questions and refrain from asking follow-up questions. Thank you. So on to Dr. McFate. Sean is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, a Washington, D.C. think tank, and a professor at Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service, Syracuse University's Maxwell School, and the National Defense University. Sean is the leading world expert on mercenaries. He is a regular consultant to the Pentagon, CIA, and even Hollywood. And he's a frequent guest on major news networks. His career began as an officer and paratrooper in the U.S. Army's 82nd Airborne Division, and then he became a private military contractor. His book, The Modern Mercenary, Private Armies, and What They Mean for World Order, examines why private warfare has returned and its implications. Foreign Affairs hailed it as an essential reading. The New Rules of War, Victory in an Era of Durable Disorder, has been translated into 10 languages and was named the Book of the Year by The Economist. Sean has written 3 novels based on his private military experiences. His latest thriller is High Treason, and the #1 New York Times best-selling author, James Patterson, said, Sean McFate just might be the next Tom Clancy, only I think he's even better. I understand there are 17 books at the bookstore, the Chautauqua bookstore here on the grounds. And I believe that Sean signed them this morning. So please go to the Chautauqua bookstore. Sean has written for the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Atlantic, Foreign Policy, War on the Rocks, and similar outlets. As a scholar, he has published 18 academic articles and 2 monographs for the U.S. Department of Defense. Sean holds a BA from Brown University and a Master's of Public Policy from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, and a Ph.D. in International Relations from the London School of Economics and Political Science. Oh, and he was also a fellow at Oxford. Sean has many interests and was even a classical music and opera critic. He is a 4th-generation Chautauquan, and he's visiting us today from DC with his son, Aiden, who is now a 5th-generation Chautauquan. And many of you know of Sean's mother, Mary Lou McFate. And if you don't know her, she is the one in the audience with the proudest smile. Right there. You can wave. Aiden's waving. So let's give Sean a wonderful Chautauqua welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It's great to be here. It's great to be back in Chautauqua. A few days ago, I was in lovely Fort Bragg, North Carolina, which is like 105 degrees and the humidity of Jakarta. So this is lovely. I was there advising U.S. Special Operations Command and the commander of the 82nd Airborne Division on this topic, on the future of war and Delta Force. And there's a lot to learn, which we'll discuss. But I want to say thank you to Chautauqua, and this is my son, Aiden. Where's Aiden? Aiden, there you are. It's his first Chautauqua experience. Aiden, who's 6, has a much busier social calendar than me here at Chautauqua. And also I want to thank the Chautauqua Women's Club. Thank you very much. Last week, you had Vice Admiral Anne Rondeau, is that correct? I'm a huge fan of Admiral Rondeau. She is the first 3-star woman in the U.S. Navy. And as you know, the Navy is like the original boys' club, right? I mean, going back to prehistorical time. And I think it says a lot of both Anne Rondeau and our Navy that she's a 3-star. So we have much to be proud of there. So thank you very much again for inviting me. It's great to be here. So, anybody paying attention to Ukraine at all? Top of everybody's mind. It's contemporary events. So do you remember, like, way back before this beautiful weather, back in February? Is anybody here in February who's here today? You are? And you're survivors, or is it, like, I think it would be really... You took, oh, okay. They took off for Hawaii. So anyway, yeah, I can't imagine here, but in February, do you remember when, Russia invaded Ukraine, and they thought they would, how quickly did everybody expect the war to be done? Not even weeks, like days, like 5 days. It starts on Monday, ends on Friday, something like that. That's what Russia expected. It's what NATO expected. It's what the U.S. military expected. It's what all those pundits on TV expected, many of which are retired general officers. And you know what? It's month 5. They were all wrong. All of them. All of them. And we're going to talk about why. I mean, we know some of the big, the Ukrainians are amazing people. They kind of remind me of us 250 years ago against King George. We all know that President Zelensky is sort of having a Churchillian moment. Here we thought he was a comedian on Russian TV and he would just cave. No, he's rallied his people and he's rallied the world. When he said, I don't need a ride, I need ammunition, the world gave Ukraine ammunition, and we're still doing it. But there's other bigger reasons why Russia is failing. And we're going to get back to that later. and also why everybody, all these other experts also failed. There were a few lone voices in the forest, but by and large, they were wrong, right? So let's get back to that later. So let's turn right now to our country. If you do or do, some of you may know is that our country, or the Department of Defense, shifted its strategic posture in 2018. It went from, prioritizing counterinsurgency and terrorists to focusing on China, Russia, and to a lesser extent, Iran, North Korea, and yes, still terrorism, but much further down. So this strategic shift happened in 2018 in the National Defense Strategy, and the nickname, really focusing on Russia and China, is GPC, Great Power Competition, GPC. And the Pentagon can't do anything unless it can turn it into an acronym. So if you hear me say GPC, just think like US versus China and or Russia. That's the number 1 priority. And do anyone take a guess who's like number 1 and number 2 in our threat analysis? Who here thinks it's China? Who here thinks it's Russia? Yeah, it's China. Now, before February, it was China and Russia down here. Then after February, it was China and Russia up here. And now it's someplace in the middle. We can't really figure it out, I guess, or somebody can't. But yeah, it's still China. And there's a lot we can say about China, but we're not going to do that right now. But that's just the posture, which is fine. And right now what's going on in Washington, D.C. is that everybody and their mother, or my mother maybe even, is doing these war games with, U.S. versus China in the South China Sea or the Strait of Taiwan. It's becoming a cottage industry for think tanks to do these war games. It's what DOD, the Department of Defense, is doing all the time. Pundits are writing about it, and there's a lot of jazz hands around it, right? Oh, we're gonna, and some of it is, of course, the Navy wants more money and ships, so they're like, we're gonna get our, whatever kicked, and we need more money, and Congress says, okay, we'll give it to you. But by and large, wargaming this scenario is what DC is doing right now. They're focused, that's great, but the question I have, are they wargaming the right kind of warfare? That's the question that nobody's thinking about. So just stepping back, there's a difference between war and warfare. War, or the nature of war, it never changes. It's armed politics. War is armed politics. And it's the same where it's the Peloponnesian War 2,400 years ago or Ukraine today. It's armed politics. Now, warfare is always changing. So war never changes, but warfare always changes. That's the sort of the style of war. Like, the technology, the weapons, the geopolitics, the terrain, leadership, all of those things. That's warfare. I mean, another way to think about it is, who here has dogs here? I've seen a lot of Chautauqua dogs, by the way. Any dogs here in the audience? What's that dog in the library who people read to? Lola. So is Lola here? I put her to sleep. That's no problem. Anyway, so think of it this way. We know that the nature of dogs are all the same. They're different than cats and canaries and everything else. They have features. They wag their tail when they're happy. They bark. They're very loyal to humans. They're very cuddly. They have eyes that you cannot resist, But we also know in reality there's many different types of dogs. There's Lola dogs. I've seen a Yorkie around here. I've seen other types of dogs, right? War is the same way. The nature of war doesn't change, just like the nature of dogs doesn't change. But in reality, there's many different types of warfare. They call it the character of war. What I'm getting at here is that our Department of Defense, just like the Kremlin, is lackadaisical when it comes to understanding the modern warfare. Modern warfare has moved on, yet Russia, NATO, and the US have not. And that's why we all struggle. It's why Afghanistan was the longest war in our history, arguably. It's why Russia's failing today. It's because warfare has changed, but our strategic thinkers have not, right? And if you look at these war games, they're really, you've ever heard that saying that generals always fight the last war, especially if they won it? Yeah, that's what they're doing. So these war games in the Straits of Taiwan are really like Midway, the Battle of Midway with Ford-class carriers, F-35s, and drones. So what they imagine the future is really the past. It's atavistic. They imagine it's like World War II with better technology. And that's not what modern war looks like. Of course, that's what Lockheed wants it to look like. Different story. All right, so in truth, the contemporary and future war will not look like traditional conventional war. It will not look like World War II. We call that conventional war, right? One of the hallmarks of conventional war, it's like just like World War II. Big country's army against big country's army, industrialized armies, the laws of armed conflict nominally in use. You win on the battlefield. Battlefield victory is supreme. The military is the most important instrument of national power, and it's like Berlin, 1945. But the problem with that vision of war is that it's already obsolete. If the social science data is very clear on this point, and most soldiers could tell you it as well, that if you track all the wars since the end of World War II, since 1945, what you see in a graph, we don't have a graph here, but just imagine, you see armed conflict going up and up and up, but those that are traditional wars, conventional wars, are flatlined on the bottom. Flatlined on the bottom. I mean, when was the last, before February this year, when was the last conventional wars? Does anybody want to take a guess? Korea, yeah. Korea for the Americans. How about for the world? Israel, 1973 is the last one, but there are some more recent ones in that. I know it's not supposed to be a seminar, I'm sorry, I can't help myself. Korea, okay, but how about the 1980s? Okay, the Iraq-Iran war was a conventional war. You could argue Gulf War I was a conventional war. And you could also argue Falkland Islands was a conventional war. Ukraine today, yeah, before February this year. But, conventional wars, you can count them in basically two hands, maybe three. All right? But meanwhile, think of all the unconventional wars in the last 70 years. I mean, they're everywhere. There's hundreds of them. Hundreds of them. And, so in truth, there's nothing more unconventional today than a conventional war, right? Meanwhile, if you look at what the Pentagon is buying for its weapons list, its Santa Claus list, they're all for conventional fights. And we are preparing for the only kind of war we are least likely to face, a conventional war. And that means a lot when new aircraft carriers cost $13 billion a ship without sailors and aviation. I mean, that's like half of Brazil's defense budget. I bet Chautauqua could use some of that, right? How about the F-35, the fighter jet? You know what the F-35 is? It's like this amazing fighter jet. Guess how much the program is costing taxpayers and allies? Just take a guess. I was waiting for some guesses out there. 600 billion is it one? 300 billion? 1 trillion. Front row, that's 1 trillion. You're all wrong. 1.5 trillion. 1.7, according to some people. Now, I'm a old, liberal arts guy, so I don't do math. Now, what that means, to put that number in perspective, $1.5 trillion is more than Russia's GDP. It's more than Saudi Arabia's GDP. On a single-seat airplane that does not go to war. The U.S. has been at war for 20 years, someplace, more than one. 0 combat missions. I used to be an old infantry paratrooper. We used to say that dog don't hunt. And we're buying more of these things. Okay? So we are in some ways just as, we can laugh at how Russia's military is so ate up, and their military is corrupt and hollow, but their strategic thinking in Kremlin is pretty bad. Ours is not that much better, and that's what I'm trying to point out, but there's hope. I'll get to that later. So social science says, we're not going to face conventional war. It's very unlikely. Also, nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons in some ways makes conventional war obsolete as of 1945. Because right now, if two great powers like US and China or US and Russia go to war, it could go nuclear within hours. And right now, nobody knows. Nobody can tell you, and they're lying if they do, like when they know Putin will decide to use a nuke. No clue. Nobody knows what's going on inside of his head. No clue. So if the US and Russia or China face off in Taiwan Straits or in Poland, it could go nuclear in one afternoon. It could be like the World War I 1914 Sarajevo moment, except by the next day the world's ash, right? So meanwhile, we're doing war games about conventional war in the Straits of Taiwan, and nobody's in that war game asking, well, when does it go nuclear? They only ask it at the conclusion when they should be asking it at the beginning. And the third reason why conventional wars are sort of obsolete, it's a time of war, it's a type of warfare, it's not universal, is because conventional wars no longer work. There's a reason why nobody uses conventional wars. You remember like in April, that huge armor column trying to get to Kiev, stuck on the road, like 40 miles. What was it doing? It's probably still there, parts of it, right? We don't know. Doing conventional war is extremely hard to do. If Russia just did what it did in 2014 when it took their Crimea, it would maybe over by now. But they did this very, unsneaky conventional blitzkrieg into Ukraine. It predictably failed, not because we helped it fail. It failed under its own weight. To organize that, you have to have the skills of a Fortune 50 company, and they don't have that, right? What they did is in April, Russia changed its strategic approach away from conventional war. You remember when they started to move all their units to the Donbass region in the east? Well, that's what they did, is they are now doing Russian unconventional war. So just to let you know what that looks like, unconventional war for the US is winning hearts and minds. Unconventional war for Russia is flattening cities and massacring civilians. It is. It's what they do. And it works. It worked for them in Grozny. It worked for them in Aleppo. It's working for them today. And they're doing other sneaky things called filtration, where if you're a Ukrainian in Luhansk or someplace, or Donetsk, a Russian military squad shows up at your door, and they have your Russian passports ready. And they confiscate your Ukrainian passports, and if you resist, they torture you, right? That's called filtration. That's not conventional war. That's not World War II. That's sneaky war. And it's working. So they've learned, and they're moving away from this conventional war. Meanwhile, I'm worried that our Department of Defense is learning all the wrong lessons from this. They see a tank used in battle, and they're like, we need to get more tanks. They don't think, what is that tank doing? In fact, tanks, I think, are obsolete, as the Javelin missile has shown us, right? So I think that we have, and so does NATO, and so does Russia, a low strategic IQ. A low strategic IQ, and it's killing people. The reason is that simply warfare changes before warriors do. And that's who's making the strategic decision-making, are old warriors. So what does modern war actually look like? It is getting sneakier. It's getting sneakier because we live in an information age where everybody has one of these, makes everybody a reporter, an analyst, a videographer, and a publisher all at once. And we've been living in an information age for the past 30 years, and unless there's some nuclear Armageddon, the next 30 years will be even more so, right? And if you live in an information age, it changes warfare. Suddenly, information can become more powerful than firepower. Information manipulation is more important than lethality. Meanwhile, the paradigm of Washington, D.C. is all about World War II style warfare. It's all about lethality. And we know that things like disinformation, and we know that all exists, but we don't know if it's war or not, curiously. This is sneaky war. Basically, you win. It's not Goliath beats David, it's David beats Goliath. In sneaky war, you win because if you can wage war, but disguise it as peace to your adversaries, you can win, right? If you can wage war and disguise it as peace to your adversaries, you can win. Now, most Americans and most people in Washington, when they think about what war is, again, they think of World War II. So what do our adversaries do? They play sneaky. They do things like they weaponize refugees. They use disinformation. The idea here is, in the old sort of rules of war, you would blitzkrieg into a country and take its capital. In the new rules, you don't do that. China's not gonna have landing craft in California to move into Colorado. What China and Russia are trying to do is that they know there's a red versus blue divide in this country, and they're trying to pour kerosene on it, light it on fire, and rip it apart. And they're doing it through disinformation. China has we know how Russia's like the disinformation superpower. China has something called the three warfare strategy, which is all about how to do this. The idea is you set a society at its own throats, so the society tears itself apart, and so you don't have to. And the idea is not that they're going to march into Washington, D.C. someday and plant a flag and say victory. That's not how it's going to work. They want the United States of America to be more like United Kingdom, a first world power, but no longer superpower. That's what they want. And, we're helping them, right? I know we spent past week was about elections, and, Russia, we know, tries to hack our elections. We don't know how successful they are. I don't think anybody does, is my opinion. But we know they're trying, and so do others. And the strategic logic is this. It's like, who cares about the sword? Who cares about the military size if you can elect a president who is sympathetic toward your values? So who cares about the sword if you can manipulate the mind that wields the sword? And that's the strategic logic. That's sneaky. Is it war? Is it peace? We don't know. So sneaky war, when you have information as the center of gravity, it changes warfare. So at the tactical level of war, what matters most are not things like tanks and artillery. It's using things that give you good, plausible deniability. Plausible deniability is the key to modern warfare. And so what we're seeing tactically, and that means like on the battlefields, something what I call shadow wars, where people want to wage war, but beneath the threshold of global media attention. Once it pops into global media attention, then it gets complicated for all sides. All sides try to bring it back down into the shadows, and they wage it. So in 2014, when Russia they invaded Ukraine, they did it using sneaky tactics, like mercenaries like the Wagner Group, which I could spend all day talking about, Spetsnaz Special Forces, Little Green Men, all these things. And they created the fog, and through their propaganda and disinformation, they create the fog of war, and these units move through it for victory. So while the West was still scratching its head in 2014 about what what was really going on in Ukraine, the Crimea was a fait accompli. That's shadow war. How about Libya? Does anybody know there's been a war there for over 10 years? We don't know who's fighting there and why. We still don't. We have insurgents, we have organized crime, we have mercenaries from Russia, from Turkey, from the Gulf states. We have we have oil companies sniffing around that area. That's a shadow war. When you do a public, not like a visible war, like Ukraine 2022, you fail, and the world rallies against you. So at the tactical level of war, you use plausible deniability. So if you get caught, you can say those weren't my guys. Or if it, you can, now how do you fight that? Well, you don't do it through conventional deterrence. Well, we have more tanks and fighter planes. That doesn't work anymore. Conventional deterrence does not work. I mean, for the last 10 years, we've been throwing carrier group after carrier group into the South China Sea. It has not stopped China from expanding the South China Sea. That just doesn't work. If you want to deal with, this new type of shadow war, what you do, if it's all about plausible deniability, then you create implausible deniability. We have a magnificent intelligence community here, CIA. They have a lot of problems, but they're still pretty good. So we can, as we saw at the beginning of the Ukraine invasion, they did something called pre-bunking. What pre-bunking is that we know Russia is going to use a false pretense to invade eastern Ukraine. Here's their false pretense, and it kind of spoils the surprise, right? You can do that, or you can get sneaky yourselves. If Russia says, hey, those Wagner Group mercenaries are really not there, well, then who will miss them if they disappear tomorrow, right? Think about that. We could do that. I'm not saying we should do that, but we shouldn't take it off the table, right? So there's many ways we can deal with implausibility, and we might want to become a little implausible ourselves. We used to do that in the Cold War, sometimes to very good effect, sometimes to disastrous effect. Now, at the strategic level of war, it gets even more interesting. The strategic is a higher level of war. So, here, war is becoming epistemological. It's because, what do you think, it's about, you ever see the movie The Matrix? Red pill versus blue pill? That's what it's about. Can foreign powers control our perceptions of reality so that we as a democracy do things that really further their interests and hurt our own? It's sometimes called the CNN effect as well, right? And we see this with fake news and hacked elections, and some of this stuff is coming from abroad. And the idea here is, again, to create divisions with our own society. Not to blitzkrieg within. You don't blitzkrieg inside a country. You don't blitzkrieg from the outside in. You do it from the inside out. You rupture it. And there's many ways to win in sneaky war. So, for example, when was the last time anybody here saw a Hollywood movie with a Chinese villain? Anybody from this millennia? No hands. We have American villains. We know that. Russian villains, terrorist villains. No Chautauqua villains, I don't think. The reason is because China bought Hollywood legally. So next time we talked about how war is becoming epistemological at the strategic level, like manipulating people's perceptions of reality. Well, Hollywood's like a WMD of perception, and they bought it. And they're building their own Hollywood, by the way, that they hope to eclipse ours. So next time you watch a movie, those studio pre-credits before the movie starts, the studios come up, see if any are in Mandarin. Legend Studio is wholly owned by Beijing the way it owns Huawei phones, right? And those are not free companies. They're under the thumb of Beijing. And that's why China is always the good guy. So, like in movies like The Martian, who saves the day? Chinese NASA, right? Anybody see Maverick, the new Top Gun movie? They had to airbrush, or they're supposed to airbrush off all the Taiwan flags, because that's, against the one China policy. So if you have a movie, and you're like Sony Studios, which doesn't like China, but you want your movie to sell in China, which is the second largest market in the world after ours, you have to submit it to Beijing censors, and they censor it heavily. Heavily. And if it's not, any script writer who has China as a villain, no studio will talk to them because it's like a waste of time, right? Now, so that makes them always the good guy, right? Now, has anybody here seen the movie Wolf Warrior or Wolf Warrior 2? How about our young Chautauquans here? Any? No? Okay. Well, you can be forgiven because it didn't play in this country. It made over $800 million globally without even playing here, the biggest movie market in the world. $800 million is like George Clooney money, all right? That's like not small. And this movie, it's made in China. It's like the original Rambo movie, where the star is like John Rambo. It's a Chinese special forces dude who's like a lethal weapon, the best of the best of China. He has a heart of gold, but doesn't take orders very well. And he sees on TV, CCTV probably, that there's an American private military company like Blackwater in Africa beating up Chinese nationals there and preying on local Africans. He goes over there single-handedly like Rambo and like kicks butt. I mean, and in the end, he has this big boss fight with the American private military guy, and he wins in a big explosions, and the whole theater goes, woohoo, yeah, you killed the bad guy. And in that movie, America is being completely vilified. We're like Darth Vader. And that's why it didn't show here, which is why nobody knows about it. But the rest of the world has seen it a lot. And in that movie, the private military company, it's a stand-in for US troops. Because only Americans distinguish between Blackwaters and Marines. To the rest of the world, it's just Americans occupying Iraq or occupying Afghanistan. So that's what the world saw. Now, creating a narrative of vilification. Now, you're like, fine, McFate. I came here to learn about the future of war. We're talking about films. That's entertaining, but who cares? Because it's a way of victory. Think about this. All of your great-grandkids are speaking Mandarin as a second language and are sympathetic to Beijing values. That's victory. Far more than like taking over a country. That's durable victory. And it's what we did to the Nazis after Germany in World War II. That war did not really end in 1945. That's when the shooting phase ended. But by the time the Berlin Wall fell down, all West Germans spoke English as a second language and loved American values and culture and capitalism and democracy and all these great things and blue jeans. Their Nazi ancestors, that's not the vision they had, right? So there are many ways to win in sneaky war, and the objective of victory is not winning on the battlefield. That doesn't work anymore, by the way. Conventional war, you win in the battlefield, Waterloo, Gettysburg, Stalingrad, and that turned the tide of a war, and it doesn't work anymore. Hey, who remembers this? Mission accomplished. 2003, we achieved perfect battlefield victory over the Iraq military. Irrelevant. Same with Russia in this past spring. They achieved good, battlefield victory. It did not win them, and they pivoted away to unconventional warfare, right? So what does win? It's this sneakiness, this being cunning and being clever. What does victory look like is a key question, and it's something called hegemonic victory. Hegemonic victory means that you're like the top dog. Anybody here have a top dog in Chautauqua? Is there a top dog in Chautauqua of all the dog owners here? I don't think so. All right, it's too egalitarian a place, even for dogs. So the question is like, to be the hegemon means that you're the dominant actor in terms of diplomacy, economics, military, information, all of those things. And everybody wants to be like you. right? And that's what victory looks like. And it's not going to be won on a battlefield. It's not going to be won by an F-35, which costs like $1.7 trillion for the program. Not going to work. Hegemonic victory, China is trying to achieve regional hegemonic victory in Asia by 1 October 2049. 1 October 2049 to mark the 100th anniversary of their victory over the nationalists who went to, Taiwan. So they have strategic patience, and they are doing things like Hollywood and economic power and yes, they're doing all of these things. So I'll just leave you with this. Think of hegemonic victory as like a casino. It's very expensive to build the casino and to staff it and to have security. And the idea, of course, is if you can do it, all the nation states of the world come to gamble at your casino. And some do well, and some don't, but we all know who wins at the end of every night: the house. That is why you want to be the hegemon. It's called, for those who care, the strategy of primacy. Now we look across the street, and here's a Russian casino going up and a really shiny Chinese one. Some of our clients and customers are leaving our casino and going to theirs and not coming out. Going into the middle of the 21st century, that is what victory looks like. And we need strategic thinkers who can get their head out of the foxhole and see that. And that some of these best thinkers are not going to be wearing stars in a military uniform. I believe the best thinkers come from the liberal arts, because a lot of the sneakiness of modern warfare it's deliberately about trying to fool people. And as Socrates says, I can't teach people what to think, I can teach them how to think. And that's what the liberal arts does, as opposed to engineering or social science. My Ph.D. is in social science, but my background, BA, are all liberal arts. And that's because it teaches you how to think around ambiguity. And that's what sneaky war does. It's trying to throw up the fog of war, and you have to outthink your adversary and not outgun them. You have to be David and not Goliath. Now, we can talk in Q&A more about that idea, but I'll leave you with this, is that, the good news is that, not everybody can be a good strategic thinker, but a good strategic thinker can come from anywhere. And we need to create a system in our government to spot and identify, recruit, and develop strategic thinkers. And we shouldn't just assume simply because somebody is, a 4-star or a senator or an security advisor, they know what they're doing. Because the hard truth is that the US has not won a big war since 1945. 1945. So let's not think we are, any better than the Kremlin or, tactically, we're the best army and military in the world, but strategically is a different problem. So I think we can do really well. There are some ideas I have, but it's now 1:15, and I'd like to explore some of those ideas in Q&A. So I put my son to sleep, so I don't know what that says, but thank you very much. I'll wait for Q&A. All right. All right. Yes, sir.
Well, thank you for endorsing the liberal arts. I just retired from the University of Buffalo, and I had to witness the overtaking of STEM. And
Yeah,
that
I agree.
Also, let me just say, before I ask my question, is that one of the big devastating things was they took away citizenship. Used to have to be American government and 2 semesters of US history. And that's supposed to teach you how to vote, And we don't need that anymore because we live in a global society. But anyway, one of the things that I learned when I worked in Washington is that you can lead a president to intelligence, but you can't make him think.
Yeah, it's a Dorothy Parker.
I'm sure
yeah.
you've heard that joke,
Yeah.
right?
It's a good joke, though.
So how do we do the mix again so that power is redistributed and, things can go on, and yet we still maintain what we're doing, because if you say what you say, that war is changing, then we need, critical thinkers and people that have abilities in psychology and media and all
Yeah.
of those kinds of things. And,
So-
and also in terms of the military.
The mob is asking for your hide, so I'm just going
Okay,
to answer the
I'm
question.
sorry.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
sorry.
going to just say we have a lot of questions here. So, and I will go past 2 if there's any interest or stamina. 3. What 3? Yeah, 3. So the tricky thing is that victorious nations like ours are very loath to change the way they fight war, to change the way of warfare, because they have hubris. They think like we're the top dog, the world's gonna change around us. This is what France did, right, after World War I. They thought the future of war would look just like the last one. They built this, the trench warfare. They built the Maginot Line. Germany innovated its way of warfare and, conquered Paris in 6 weeks. For a victorious nation like ours to change its way of war usually requires a lot of blood, right? And sometimes not even then, if you look at the French example. And part of the changing the way of war requires new types of thinking about what is the future of war. And that's the lacuna right now. And I'm trying to do my best with my sort of little crusade to go out and do this. And I'm not alone. There's an intellectual insurgency in the Defense Department in Washington, D.C., but there's still very much a minority. And there's a lot of, perverse incentives against doing this, like the military-industrial complex, which I can wax lyrical about for those interested. But, we also got to meet people halfway. I mean, in the liberal arts, war is a dirty word. In social science, it's a dirty word. You can't get a Ph.D. in war studies. If you do study war, it's about there's a lot of things you can learn about it. But I think what we really I'm trying to convince both the liberal arts community and the defense community that they have mutual, not just concerns, but obligations. Because we have a moral duty to be competent in warfare, because otherwise a lot of people die. All right, let's go over here.
Hi. So I grew up in that part of the world that we are talking about today. So I grew up in the former Soviet Union, spent 10 years in the Soviet Army, retired in '88. And then in '91, I watched with fascination and with a lot of joy how the Soviet Union broke apart. So in your opinion, was it a result of a sneaky war victory, or was it just, a decomposition by itself?
I mean, the end of the Cold War?
In '91.
Oh, yeah, this is he's asking who won and how did the Cold War end? So this is like you want in 25 words or less, or, this is historians are still debating this. I mean, in my opinion, it wasn't U.S. sneaky war. I mean, the U.S. and the papacy had some sneak, if you will, but there's a confluence of factors, as you know, from generational, political corruption at the top, lack of progress of the Lenin Marxist ideal, the war in Afghanistan sucking the economy, the regime lying to the mothers who were asking, where happened to my sons? And that was I think the only real successful peace movement in USSR history. All these things have been stewing for a long time. And I think some people in the US like to take credit for it, but I really think that the biggest credit goes to the USSR itself for imploding. Yeah, yeah.
First of all, thank you for your service to our country.
Yeah. Thank you.
Prediction, how do you think this Ukraine thing is going to play out?
Yeah. Well, my prediction is, and was it Yogi Berra says that predictions are hard, especially about the future, something like that. Is that Putin knows right now. For Putin, they pivoted away from conventional, traditional war to do their other thing. And they know that as long as they don't use nukes or encroach on NATO, NATO is going to leave him alone. It's pretty much it. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to impose as much pain as possible on Ukraine so that Zelensky says uncle and will go to the negotiating table on Russia's terms. And they're going to cook that for a while. And I think what he wants is to create, I think ideally what Russia wants is to make Ukraine a landlocked country with 3 sides are Russian and 1 side is NATO. And then just let it cook and simmer until they can do their sneaky ways and just have a regime change for one of their puppets, which is their playbook. So I think that's what's going to happen over the next, couple years. And I think, every time Kim Kardashian gets a new dress, we forget about Ukraine. So he's banking on our short attention span and the Twitterverse. He's weaponizing that, if you will. So that's my prediction. But, check with me 30 days from now. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
I'm former Air Force. I'm a liberal arts graduate, degree in economics. In the latest issue of Foreign Affairs magazine is a widely heralded article concerning the proposal for the formation of the G12. The G12, those countries would represent about 65% of the world GDP. Russia and China would represent today, and for the foreseeable future, about 18% of the world GDP. It would be tantamount to making a new, modern Marshall Plan. My question is, are you familiar with the proposal for the G12? If so, please provide me or us your opinion of that proposal. And number 2, what is our real defense against cyber warfare?
So 2 questions, economic power and cyber war, okay. Yes, sir. And first of all, you also are an opera fan, which I, of course, greatly admire. And great opera tonight, I'm looking forward to hearing it. All right, so I have not read the article, I'm familiar with the argument. I'm very skeptical on all this stuff because, China is the second largest, by GDP, the second largest country in the world. Some think it's going to catch up to the US and eclipse us in 10 years. I don't think so. I think that there's a lot of problems with how they calculate economic power. But at the end of the day is that trying to create a economic bloc is like trying to herd cats. And we've seen this, and it's very rare for cartels to hold integrity, and it's easy to cheat. And we've had this problem already with like Iran sanctions. I just think that people show up to Davos, they show up to these meetings, and they say the right things, but it doesn't always translate. The policies don't actually translate to the ground, and I think that when it comes to, without getting into too much detail, when it comes to economic alliances, there's all sorts of collective action problems, and you have the prisoner's dilemma often on these things. So I think that might be interesting, but I think too much credence is invested into that as a solution. In terms of cyber, I think that people do cyber with jazz hands a lot. I think cyber and AI and all, I think the power of cyber is not destruction. It's not like going into remember 10 years ago, Stuxnet, which was an Israeli-American virus that they used to blow up some of the nuclear centrifuges in Natanz in Iran, the nuclear program. It really didn't have any lasting effect. I think the real power of cyber is information, or is disinformation. And one of the main problems we have in intellectual thinking is that we conflate information with the internet. And those are 2 different things. The internet's a channel of information, just like newsprint, radio, TV, and it's not information itself. So I think that cyber, its real power is the power of disinformation, for the sneakiness. We did not see a huge cyber takedown of Ukraine, you know, in the early war. Cyber has been conspicuously AWOL from that war. I think there's a lot of hyperbole around what the potential of cyber can do and what AI is. I mean, again, like, you know, 15 years ago, Siri would be considered AI. Now it's just an app, right? A lot of hyperbole around it. So I think it's important, but I turn down the volume anytime I hear the sales talk. That's my cynical perspective. Okay, I'll read the article. Okay, yeah.
Hi. Is there any lingering validity to the concept of rules of war anymore?
What kind of rules? Like the legal rules of war?
Yeah, the internet, the
Oh,
Geneva
not in my
Convention,
opinion.
and
Oh,
also,
no.
how do the use of the Wagner Group and other private militias impact current warfare?
Okay, good answer. So I actually talked to people in the Wagner Group. The Wagner Group's a bunch of elite mercenaries, Russian mercenaries, and I'll tell you what they tell me, and they don't talk to anybody really else, at least in the English-speaking world, is they don't want to be there, okay? They would rather be mercenaries in the Gulf states, where it's like double the money and a quarter the risk, guarding pipelines. That's what they want to do. Now, why are they fighting in Ukraine and elsewhere, in Mali and other places? The reason is, there's all sorts of reasons why people become mercenaries, which is another talk another time. But basically, Russia has this really strange thing. It's a very Russian thing, very Kafkaesque, where they hire the Wagner Group to be their main instrument of power abroad, their main, military. It's not special forces, it's not the KGB, whatever it's called anymore. It's the Wagner Group because of plausible deniability. But if Wagner Group guys want to work for a Gulf state, then what happens is, get this, Russia has some of the strongest anti-mercenary laws on the books anywhere. And they roll those guys up and send them to the Gulag. And that's how Russia maintains discipline over their mercenaries. So it's like, you can be mercenaries as long as you're doing the Kremlin's bidding, and we sort of tacitly approve that that's okay. So, and the reason why we're seeing the rise of mercenaries everywhere, it's not just Russia. I mean, remember, like a year ago, the president of Haiti was assassinated by Colombian mercenaries. And we caught the mercenaries, and nobody knows who hired them. That's plausible deniability for you, And so what that means that somebody assassinated, a head of state and got clean away with it. So, what this means, mercenaries are the ultimate implausible deniability warriors, because even if they get caught, they don't know who hired them, and you can cut them loose. And the laws of armed conflict were designed and evolved to mitigate conventional wars only. And since conventional wars are pretty much expired, it's pretty useless, right? And our adversaries use this against us. So terrorists ride around the battlefield in ambulances, knowing they won't be struck by Hellfire missiles. Russia uses the Wagner Group. How they took the Crimea is totally illegal in international law. Got away with it. China is even weirder. They use something called lawfare, where they actively undermine international law and reimagine it in their own way, and it's brazen. I mean, you talk to international lawyers and you trigger them. You'll be stuck there for an hour listening to them vent about this. So the laws of armed conflict are, in my opinion, hideously outdated, and we should either update them to reflect modern warfare, or we should abandon the project entirely. All right, over here.
Could you comment on what we can do to reduce the risk of nuclear war?
Not really. Look, nuclear war, it's been around for 70 years, but it's actually still much more theoretical than cyber war. We might see limited nuclear war. What happens if Putin pops off a nuclear weapon in North Siberia? So I don't know. And also, when it comes to autocracies like Putin, it's hard to know where his ego ends and Russian foreign policy begins. And so because reestablishing the Russian Empire as his legacy item, and we think he's dying of cancer, I can explain why we think that, then, you know, who knows? So I think the risk of nuclear war is real, and I don't know how to put a number on that, and I don't know how to mitigate it. Because my great fear, what keeps me awake at night, is accidental warfare, right? So imagine, you know, you have two, you know, an American fighter pilot and a Chinese fighter pilot sort of doing their thing in the air. One gets shot down and it escalates by kind of accidentally into a nuclear war. And the first side who thinks it's going to lose is going to use a nuclear weapon. So I don't know. I mean, it also depends who's in the Oval Office, right? We know who's going to be in Beijing for the next 20 years probably, but we don't know who's going to be there in 2024. So that depends a lot too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Sean. As they say at Fort Benning, all the way.
All the way, yes. Airborne all the way.
A quick aside before my question, and a classic example of successful probable denial is the ingenious way the Israelis are going after the Iranians.
Sure, yes.
In many facets.
Yes.
Okay, since World War II, as you properly, I think, pointed out, we've not prevailed in Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Because we tend to focus on weapon systems, we count tanks, et cetera.
Yeah.
And we have abjectly failed to understand the culture and the intentions of our enemies. Mm-hmm. In many
Yep.
ways, in all of these. In Vietnam, where I was, it was an example. So you visiting headquarters SOCOM down in Tampa,
Yep.
they tell me that they must have some group that understands, in order to prevail in the future, do we not have a group of far-thinking intelligence persons, not just the CIA and DIA who have failed, but who understand your point and are looking out of the ordinary and excuse me, and projecting how we prevail in the heads of our potential enemies.
It's a great, I mean, so yeah. So to your point, we have not done well. We have the best military in the world. We haven't won a war since 45. So there's a big problem there. And what we're doing is we're doing the definition of insanity, which is like we're doubling down on conventional war, not just, weapons, but strategies. We're doing all the same mistakes again and again and again. We're learning nothing. And you'd think that there would be some, group there. SOCOM, Special Operations Command, they are more enlightened than most. But right now what's happening is that the US Navy and the Air Force are elbowing them out of the way, saying, hey, you had your 20-year war and you lost. It's now our turn to have our war. And it's going to be all big battleships and all that, I mean, it sounds like, Aiden's first grade class, but it's worse. They do have some smart people, but here's the problem, is that when it filters up, it gets eaten by the blob. The blob being like the group think of the Washington consensus. I have a love-hate relationship with the Foreign Affairs magazine. Who was the gentleman here asked about one of the articles? Because if you ever want to read what the blob is thinking, read Foreign Affairs Journal, right? There's some smart things there, and there's also a lot of not so smart things. But to have like truly innovative thinkers, they have Cassandra's curse. Cassandra, you may remember from the Iliad, Princess Cassandra, she had the gift that she had, the gods gave her the gift of prophecy, but the curse that no one would believe her. And we have lots of examples in American military history of people who had Cassandra's curse, like Billy Mitchell, the guy, the founder of the Air Force, and some others. So I do talk to these people. These people exist, but their voices kind of don't make it all the way to the top, also in part because the blob, but like the people at the very top, if you want to become Secretary of Defense today or National Security Advisor, you generally are part of the office-seeking class of Washington, D.C., and not the thinking class. Maybe you're lucky and they're coincident. Maybe you're not. I mean, think of the neocons and how we invaded Iraq, right? I mean, so anyway, I don't think much has changed since your days in Vietnam is my short. I mean, was there a brilliant group?
We're not in the days of enlightenment, that's for sure.
Okay.
In Vietnam, by the way, a lesson that we learned the hard way was after the war, being part of the Air Force that bombed the hell out of the North.
Linebacker, yeah.
One reason they knew they would defeat us is that we had restrictions on what we could bomb, and they couldn't conceive of fighting a war with restrictions, and they
Right.
knew that they would prevail.
Well, that's the point. We have, yeah. And in fact, in 1999, for those who are really taken to this, these two colonels in China wrote a very interesting book, which you can download, called Unrestricted Warfare, which is basically how most people fight wars. There's this idea of like, let's legislate the battlefield is something that's really ahistorical and new, and arguably not successful. Something to think about. All right, question here.
Before his 100th birthday, and a few days before he died, George Shultz gave a lecture at the Commonwealth Club, and he discussed demographics as destiny.
Yeah.
And his big fear was that Africa today has 17% of the world's population. Based on current birth rates and death rates, Africa will have 40% of the world's population at the end of this century. Africa has no history of dealing without corruption. They have no history of ability to feed themselves. He believes that this is going to, the population of 3.5 billion will put massive pressure on immigration. And the real message is that China is weaponizing demographics. They're playing the long game of saying they're going to control commodities, they're going to build roads. And when 150 million Africans line up to get into Europe, or 150 million line up to get in America, it will show the end of demographic governments. And I wonder if you might speak to the wisdom of that centurion.
Well, I lived and worked in Africa for many years in war zones, and I do believe that he's correct. I do think that one of the big trends in the next couple decades will be immigration flows, and how people in places absorb them, and the politics. I mean, we saw the Brexit, right? Respond to that. So I do think there's a lot there, and that they can be weaponized. I mean, you look at the reason, like, why are people fighting for Libya, right? That war has been going on for 12 years. Well, here's the reason. I mean, Russia is not there, or used to be there. They don't need any more oil. They're a petro economy. They got too much. Everybody who's sneaky knows that whoever controls Libya controls a spigot of all these problems of illegal immigrants, of refugees, of narcotics, of small arms and light weapons that they can turn on that will go into the European Union, and suddenly you become very political with the European Union, right? If you want something out of the EU and they're not giving it to you, you just turn that spigot a little bit and they say, okay, you get it. So that's why Libya is important, and it's an example of weaponizing, migration and stuff like that.
Yeah, and the real issue there is, if the U.S. can't deal with 150,000 Central Americans trying to get into America, what are we going to do when 150 million Africans are trying to get in?
Well, I'll leave that to others. It's smarter than me to answer that question. All right, I'm going to take a last question. I'll still be here. I want to take the last question. I have a parting thing to think about. Okay, last question.
Thank you. My husband and I, we've been living in Hong Kong and China for 15 years.
Okay.
I'm very glad to hear your talk today. So China thinks in longer terms. They have 5-year plans, 10-year presidential terms until recently, and then the 2049 China Dream Plan. So they sustain success and national pride by maintaining these national goals, however lofty. And I've heard a couple of questions, and you yourself mentioned, this longevity of how China thinks, or basically how China thinks. And I wanted to know your thoughts on how America can create that strategic longevity that you were talking about to focus on success.
Yeah.
And I know our system has 4-year presidential terms and whatnot, but how can we create strategic longevity?
Yeah, so I think the answer is we have to first create a grand strategy. We don't have one, which is hard to believe, right? During the Cold War, we had a grand strategy. It was called containment. Every administration had a little different take on containment, but the logic of the strategy was kept intact. And we need that because it aligns our entire government on a goal. If you want to read an example of what a grand strategy might look like, read NSC 68 in 1950. That's our it's unclassified now, NSC 68. And it's not very long, it's very short. I mean, over the years, we get these big tomes of strategic documents, it's mostly fluff, right? The second thing is I think we should be, also let's not assume that China's going to take over the world. When I talk to China experts, they come in two stripes. One, China's going to take over the world by 2049. The other, China's going to implode by 2049. Not much in between. I do think there's a lot we can do, and I want to segue this to my last comment, and then I'll come down and talk to the other questions, just respectful of people's time. So is that there are things that we can do, right? Now, if you look at sort of the new sneaky way of war, and it's sneaky because it works in a global information age, all right? You might say, well, doesn't this, you would be right to say this really advantages autocracies because they can fight sneaky. They're not accountable to an electorate. They have media control. They control the businesses. They can break international law with impunity. They can do all this. So, and meanwhile, democracies are vulnerable. We're open societies. They can mess with our free press, our elections, all these things. But, and here's the big but, guess what? Democracies are resilient, and autocracies are very, very brittle, right? There's all sorts of sneaky things that we could do to retard, the march of autocracies if we want, or China in this case. For example, this is just one of many. Let's instigate a palace coup, right? So autocracies, they're not even like a pyramid with a dictator on top. They're more like a telephone pole. And on the top of that, you have the autocrat and his lieutenants around him. And the autocrat is always worried about his life expectancy, no matter how cool a customer he is. If we could covertly convince him that one or two of his lieutenants are going to stage a palace coup, he will get rid of them for us, right? We could do that. We could do a lot of things. We just choose not to do that, right? So let's think about that. Maybe we should be a little bit more sneaky. Maybe being a good guy all the time is not going to be a successful, sustainable strategy. But before you go down that road too much, let's remember from the Church Committee at 75, 76, that secrets and democracy are not compatible. So how does the US wage secretive wars or whatever and not lose its democratic soul? We gotta think about that. That's the national question we should be asking, not how many F-35s we need to buy, right? And then think about this. What happens if we don't even try? Because sometimes it feels to me like we are like a goalie at a penalty shootout, where autocracies are trying to kick the soccer ball in the net, and we're like mad goalie trying to stop them, and no matter how good we are, we can't stop them all. And is it really better? I mean, I'll end with this. Is it somehow better to lose honorably than to win dishonorably? Thank you very much.